Anti-Citizen 1 Reinfection.
So a while ago I covered Half-Life 2 and all of its ports on different systems. And while I did briefly take a look at Half-Life 2 on original Xbox, I wanted to sit down and actually play through the game front to back and get a good idea of what it really is like compared to the modern PC versions. Half-Life 2 on Xbox is a really impressive port that came out just a year after the original launch of the game. Over the years, Half-Life 2 has been playable on a handful of different systems, but I think that the original Xbox port is one of the more interesting versions of the game. The original version of Half-Life 2 on Xbox has a lot of interesting little differences that I think make it a special sort of experience for fans of the original game. I think that Half-Life 2 on Xbox is worth a second look. While I don't think that I can give you a technical breakdown like certain channels do, I do think that I can give you a personal experience and something that would be akin to if you played it as a fan of the original game. I mostly wanted to see how the Half-Life 2 experience changes compared to if you bought the game on PC right now. Considering I've played through Half-Life 2 like over a dozen times, I do think that I can at least provide an interesting point of view. I was a little curious, so before I jumped in, I wanted to see what the initial reviews were for this port. I really like looking back at old video game journalism and seeing what people's opinions were on things that came out at a time when most people didn't really pay attention to video games in the same way that they do today. I looked back at IGN and GameSpot's reviews. I looked back at IGN and GameSpot's reviews from back in the day. It's interesting to see the way that people have changed their opinions on things and the things that people were more willing to put up with.
Wake up and smell the ashes.
The only major criticism that this version of the game got back in the day was the frame rate issues and the lack of multiplayer. But they also mentioned that the PC version itself also was only running at 30 frames at the time anyway, which makes the version on Xbox all that more impressive. In the IGN articles, they do mention the different ways that Valve had used new technology to provide the Xbox with a version of Half-Life 2 that was entirely playable. They focused on the fact that it doesn't cut any corners, which is true, and that it runs at 480p and supported Dolby 5.1. Another major thing that people talked about at the time was the 360 version, because the original 360 was coming out at the exact same time that Half-Life 2 made it to the original Xbox. The Xbox version did end up becoming backwards compatible on 360, but we'll get to that in a moment. Nonetheless, I think it's really interesting to look back at these old reviews, and they're all archived online too. So if there's any games that you're a fan of, I highly recommend going back and looking at those old reviews just for fun and to see what people thought about things at the time.
Man, a few words, aren't you?
Like I just mentioned, the original Half-Life Xbox version is fully playable on 360 through backward compatibility. I got Xbox Half-Life 2 working on my 360, so most of the footage you'll be seeing is that version. I did also play it on the original Xbox just to compare, but I don't have a good way of capturing that footage. Based on my tests, the frame rate dips in the same places and the game runs almost identically. Generally speaking, this is identical to how it would be if you played the game on an Xbox. With all that out of the way, let's take a look at Half-Life 2 on the original Xbox. Right from the get-go, you'll notice that the UI has been completely redone for the Xbox version. In order to save on loading times, the rendered backgrounds are completely removed in this version of the game, and they added a new UI that's designed for controllers, along with some new sound effects. There's also a short demo video that'll play if you have the game on idle. The orange box would later receive a slightly different version of this that's a bit closer to the actual PC version. I actually kind of prefer this version of the menu because it just seems a little bit more developed. Having a nice UI and menu design is always a nice little bonus. The control setup is actually slightly different than it would be on the orange box version. Despite how similar the Xbox controller is to the 360 controller, there are some differences. notably the black and white buttons. White runs as the flashlight, kind of like it does in Halo, and the black button is used for the squad controls. I really like the black and white buttons on the original Xbox. I wish more modern controllers kept these tertiary buttons that are intended for additional features. I think they would work great in a modern game as a map button or something like that.
Hold still, Laszlo. You there! You idiot! Walking on the sand right there, lying down! I'm hurt. Dear God.
The main thing to note in Half-Life 2 on original Xbox is that it's based on the vanilla game from 2004. You'll notice that there are a lot of things that aren't quite the same if you bought the game on Steam today. In my earlier video, I mentioned that the Vortigaunt models are still their original 2004 counterpart, and they're not nearly as smooth, but the same could be said about almost everything in Half-Life 2. As far as I'm aware, certain particle effects and lighting effects were altered in the Orange Box releases. Compared to even the modern PC version, the audio has been improved in a lot of different ways. Things like the Breencast monitors echo a lot more and add a lot of atmosphere to the game.
Welcome to City 17. It's safer here.
That first City 17 monologue is probably the most notable example of this though. I feel like the sound the SMG makes in the modern version of Half-Life 2 is just weirdly loud, and it's not quite that bad in the original Xbox version. There are some cheat codes that you can do in-game to do a few things. Just some simple things though, like unlocking all the levels or refilling your ammo. Don't expect to be breaking the game in half like you can on PC. At least you can put in a Konami code and it'll give you some health. Another major thing that sticks around from the original PC version are glitches. The most useful glitch was obviously prop flying. Being able to grab any object and sort of shimmy your way in the air made a lot of parts in the game that were a bit more annoying fully skippable. Throughout my playthrough, I used this to my advantage multiple times. I'll never have to do a physics puzzle ever again because I can just prop fly my way away. While it's not exactly that easy to do on a controller, it was a lot of fun when I got it to work. My first experience with Half-Life 2 was on Orange Box, so a lot of these glitches just weren't a thing when I played the game. But you can also go back and download old versions of Half-Life 2 if you really wanted to. I know a lot of speedrunners do that. Still, I had a lot of fun just propping my way around things. Like those old articles said, the original game has been preserved almost one for one across the board. That is, except for two major parts in the game. In Half-Life 2, you have to play through these vehicle sections, and since you've got access to these vehicles that cover so much ground, the developers had to break up the levels a little bit in order to prevent the game from having to load everything all at once. In Water Hazard, a few parts had to be adjusted in order to keep the map size smaller, such as this one part when you enter this combine area. The entrance has a weird curve to it for some reason, and the layout has changed slightly, and the gate in this long part is completely blocked, probably to prevent rendering all the other stuff. In Highway 17, there's these large open maps with very long sightlines, and so Valve cut a lot of these parts into pieces. You'll notice the addition of one or two tunnels in order to break up the level. Loading screens in general are just more common on Xbox. There is one major change in Highway 17 that I think does in a weird way affect how you would perceive the story. There's this section with this lookout where you can take a look through the scope and see the G-Man talking to Cubbage. And while it doesn't really provide any exact story details, it is a weird sort of Easter egg that it's just missing because of the map size. It's a small detail, but it is a loss. One change I found kind of strange in Highway 17 was that this one house is gone for some reason. I don't know why, but for some reason this third house in this section before the bridge is completely eliminated. I don't see why this is gone, maybe because there was a fake fireplace. There are probably dozens of these small map changes, but those are just the ones that I happen to notice. There is one other bug that I found out about, kind of by happenstance. In the console versions of Half-Life 2, guns and ammo have a little glow to them. And when I was playing through the Ravenholm chapter, I noticed that Father Gregori's gun was glowing. I didn't know about this bug before, but you could find a way to get his gun. I looked further into it and found out that if you run beneath the area where he stands and shoot away the gun, he'll pick up his own gun and then give it to you. That meant that you got a cool little extra weapon that you could mess around with.
Catch!
It has 2 rounds that take from the revolver ammo supply, and it fires 1 shot at a time that's 100% accurate. I wouldn't really call it a good weapon per se, but it is just fun to have. One thing to note is that there is no multiplayer here. I don't know how many people got into Half-Life 2 Deathmatch back in the day, but I played the heck out of it, and not having any sort of multiplayer here is a bit of a disappointment. I think at the time, Valve kind of figured that Half-Life 2 on Xbox was just something that they needed to finish so that they could move on to the orange box. And so multiplayer wasn't even that much of a priority. But in the end, it's cool to see Half-Life 2 run on a system from this generation at all. Let's take a moment here and really talk about the graphics. Half-Life 2 on Xbox has to cut a lot out to run here. Not just speaking about the map geometry from before, character models are really, really rough here. If you take a good look at any of the body textures for any character, you'll quickly notice how low the resolution can get, especially for the rebels. In general, all of the models that aren't for main characters are cut down pretty heavily. Ragdolls and other debris objects also despawn really quickly. That also actually caused a bit of trouble for me when I was trying to use those same objects to prop fly. Anytime there's a lot of physics objects moving around at once, the frame rate also takes a big dive. This mostly affects whenever you're using explosive barrels, or really any time you're using the gravity gun. One of the highlights, I would say, was at the end of the game, when I found myself just kind of pressing the buttons and hoping that people would fall over, because the lag was just that intense. Running the game on an Xbox is absolutely going to come with compromise. Some other small notable things, ammo boxes can't be just blasted open with the gravity gun. You have to either use a crowbar or pick it up and throw it against the wall. I also found this glitched out area in front of the Combine Nexus. One other thing to note is that Combine soldiers are not distinguished by color. That was added in the orange box. I was playing the game on hard mode, and honestly, the shotgun Combine would destroy me. If you get too close to a Combine soldier, and he just happens to have a shotgun, you're going to get run down so quickly. And because he's not color-coded, you can't really distinguish the difference. When it comes to playing Half-Life 2, I don't think you should necessarily go out of your way to play this version of the game, but I do think it's just cool to have. I find myself more and more fascinated by these weird PC ports, and I felt like from my last video, I had to do this version of Half-Life 2 justice. I can't say I'm going to go back and play Orange Box on 360 and cover that in more depth because I felt like there wasn't too much to say, but this version in particular does have so many little things that I find interesting. And realistically, it's a perfectly fine way to play the game. Valve really likes to update their previous games, and because of that, you do technically lose the original experience of playing Half-Life 2. All of those bugs that I mentioned are patched out on PC. So in a weird way, you could argue that you aren't really playing the original Half-Life 2, unless of course you go out of your way to download an old version. And so physical copies of Half-Life 2 like this will be a way to somewhat experience what it was actually like to play Half-Life 2 in 2004, at least if you had an Xbox. So at the end of the day, that was Half-Life 2 on Xbox. I definitely see myself coming back to these console versions more and more because there's something of value to be found in playing old versions of your favorite games. So that's it for today, but thanks again for watching, and if you liked the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Take care, guys.
I've fallen, and I can't get up.